and welcome to this AB Helicopters video, part of the Learn to Fly series. Today we're going to have a look at diversions, specifically what is a diversion, examples of why we might divert, what preparation you can do before you take off, and the process to follow in flight. Now this video is focused at VFR flying. Click on the link above if you want to find out more about IFR alternates. A diversion occurs when you have to land somewhere other than your intended destination. Now this can be for a whole number of reasons. Most commonly, it's due to weather deterioration en route or at the destination, be that low cloud, poor visibility, approaching weather fronts, or significant weather such as a thunderstorm. However, you might need to divert because of a system malfunction that requires a reset on the ground, a technical issue requiring you to land as soon as practical, a low fuel state where you can't reach the destination safely with your reserves intact, or when the destination is no longer suitable for landing, for example, a blocked runway due to an incident. Pre-flight preparations. Well, unfortunately, diversions usually occur towards the end of a flight, when fuel reserves are often limited. The crew might be fatigued, or it occurs during a phase of low arousal. Having pre-planned contingency reduces the stress, uncertainty, and reduces the confusion and the alarm in the cockpit. Consider predetermined fuel states for different diversion airfields along your route. En route decision points, especially if you're on a long distance cross-country flight with limited viable divert options along the way. How do we select a diversion destination? First of all, and most importantly, it has to be within your current fuel reserves. Secondly, it needs to not be affected by the issues at the original destination. So, if weather has caused your destination to become unsuitable, your diversion airfield needs to be suitably far away from any weather front. However, it might be due to temporary restricted airspace. Again, it needs to be suitably far away from that. There are, of course, some lower priority considerations to be accounted for if multiple options exist. These secondary considerations include potentially maintenance availability, fuel availability, ease of recovery back to base, hangar edge, opening hours of the facility. You also want to maximise the probability of being able to safely approach and land at your diversion. So if the airfield has multiple runways, there's less chance of it also being affected or closed as well. Also consider performance. If the diversion option has a large open area or runway, that's preferable to a confined landing strip, especially if performance and power are an issue. You may not have the prevailing wind data to ensure that you're landing directly into wind. Diversion decision making. Now, prior preparations prevent poor performance, and during the pre-planning phase, using threat and error management principles is a sound way to ensure that you've considered various different options before you fly. Plan contingencies for alternative destinations based on airport availability, phase of flight, and the prevailing weather direction. Here's an example of reviewing possible divert options. Consider a helicopter flight from Manchester Barton down to Denham Airfield. It's about 130 miles, about an hour's flight, so plenty of time for a little bit more fuel. As you're coming further south, think about the different alternate airfields that you could use. Well, first of all, south end, all the way off to the east. The advantage is that it's low lying, it's least affected by the cloud base because it's close to sea level. It has an ILS, if that was an option, if your helicopter was equipped with instrument landing system. It's got readily available fuel, it's a secure site. The downsides, well, it's not an option after around 11 o'clock at night because it closes. And if the weather is coming in from the east, then that will be the first airfield to be affected by the weather, so it'll be unsuitable. How about Elstree, slightly off to the east of Denham? Well, it has good fuel availability, including out of hours. However, it's an unsecure sky without hangarage options, and potentially it's close enough to Denham to be affected by any inclement weather that makes Denham unsuitable in the first place. Next up, well, you've got Biggin Hill on the other side of London. It has an ILS, again, for the same reason as Southend, if your helicopter is equipped with instrument landing system. It has fairly easy transport options. It's a major airport. You can easily get a taxi accommodation, for example. It's secure. It has good fuel availability, but it is on top of a hill, which means that if you're affected by low cloud, that'll be one of the first airfields to be affected by this. However, the flip side of that is, if Denham or your destination is affected by fog, low-lying fog, Biggin Hill being on top of the hill might actually be one of the remaining airfields you can safely land at. You have to be aware of its hours of operation. Usually it closes by 11 o'clock in the evening. So if you're doing a late night flight, that might be out of the question. So what can we do in flight to be prepared for any diversion and be aware of any conditions? Well, in-flight weather checks are a great way of increasing your situational awareness. Using crew or passenger mobile devices or iPads, applications such as Sky Demon or the Met Office, or third-party weather apps such as AeroWeather, a great way if your helicopter is approved for transmitted personal electronic devices to get additional weather information whilst you're flying. You can also tune ATIS frequencies of various airports that you're approaching to get a good understanding of what the weather conditions are on the ground. You can also ask ATC, ask for the weather report at your destination airfield if you're worried that the weather might be an issue. And then, of course, you can listen to other air traffic or pilot reports. You'll get a good indication suddenly if there's a number of aircraft that are diverting from one airfield. You start thinking, why is that? And ask. So how can you avoid being caught out? Well, you can set yourself personal minimums for the day above the legal limit of what it is safe to fly. A trip further from home base, where there are fewer alternative landing sites and a longer overall flight where you push the total endurance of the helicopter, the higher your personal minimums should be set. And if in flight you're ever uncomfortable with the situation, then make the call to divert early. It's always better to be on the ground wishing you're in the air than vice versa. Diversion is a section of the PPL skills test, and it's a very practical skill. Fortunately, it doesn't get used very often, but it is important to be proficient and to know the correct process to follow in a real-life situation. So, this is my take on a diversion procedure. First of all, if you find yourself having to divert, note the time. It helps you keep track of the fuel remaining. Unfortunately, there have been plenty of aviation accidents that have been due to a focus of attention on a single problem, leading to a loss of situational awareness. An example of this is the incident of United Flight 173 back in 1978, where a scheduled passenger flight that was meant to take 2.5 hours ended up running out of fuel whilst holding directly over the destination airfield for over an hour, whilst the flight crew attempted to diagnose a fault. Verify the airplane's or the aircraft's current position. Use all the resources in the cockpit to help you. Moving map tablets, GPS systems that can tell you where the nearest airport feature is, and delegate the tasks if you have anyone else in the cockpit that's suitably proficient. Determine the location of the new destination, roughly how far is it versus your fuel remaining, and then turn in the approximate direction, considering airspace obstructions and adverse weather. An early approximate heading is important to ensure that you're at least moving in the right direction towards the new destination whilst you're busy making further calculations or checks. Use the direct to functionality of any GPS unit on board to at least get you pointing in approximately the right way. Then, when you've bought yourself a little bit more time, start to compute the estimated time en route, the time of arrival, and the exact required fuel you need for this. Is this sufficient? And then you can start to revise your heading, correcting for the drift. You can contact ATC to amend any flight plan or clearance, and remember, ATC can often help you providing a course and distance to an airfield if you request it. And then start to mark up your chart to identify any major features that can be used to confirm your position and your track along the diversion route. Check for any controlled airspace that you might need to obtain permission to fly through first. Now, hopefully this will provide an overview into the process of diversions. It's not something you intend to use every flight, but it is a good example of how spending a little bit of extra time planning for contingencies before you take off can hugely pay off in flight. And if you find yourself caught out with unexpected weather, or when circumstances turn against you to prevent you from continuing to your destination, some pilots use the concept of an en route decision point as a check marker to trigger you to change your flight path. The American National EMS Pilots Association used the example of weather. Any weather that forces you to slow down by about 30 knots in order to maintain visual references. That's your trigger to either turn around, land, or if suitably equipped, fly IFR instead. But you should not continue. And if you want to find out more about safely flying bad weather and why it's so often fatal for VFR pilots, then click in the link above. Now, thanks for watching, and until next time, fly safe.